before I would be able to tackle something new or deal with stress, muscle through it, whatever. And I didn't have the muscle through capability anymore. And I was so full of self-doubt that my joy was ripped from my successes, and all of my failures were just blamed on me. Like, there couldn't be any external thing. It couldn't just be bad luck. It couldn't just be a moment in time. It had to be like a huge failure. And every new thing that I was trying to do was so hard and felt like, slogging up a mountain. And I think that's one of the reasons that keeps so many women from realizing that what they're going through is perimenopause, is this relationship between perimenopause symptoms and stress, because they actually magnify one another.
Sure.
And so often we've got so many rational reasons to be stressed out.
Yes.
Well, you're lonely, you've moved to a new place,
Yeah.
you've lost your job, you're trying,
It's all real.
and my kid is sick, I'm worried about my teenager. There's always a reason. The thing that has been surprising to me, and another reason I think women don't realize what's happening to them, is you still have your period for such a long time. So the definitions, which were kind of new to me, were that perimenopause is all of that period that can start in your mid-30s and go all the way up until your period stops. And during all that time, 15 years or more, you can be having crazy symptoms, and then at some point, usually in your 50s, your period will stop, and when you haven't had it for a year, that's when you have menopause. And so that was all new to me, just like even knowing what was happening to me and what the names were, I found
The
to be
stages even. Because there's definite stages, I mean, I haven't had my period in 8 months now. I started getting really, really, really fucking angry, like all the time.
Yes.
And I was never, that was not something I ever felt like was a part of my personality.
Yeah.
And I had a teenage daughter, so I was like, well, of course, I'm pissed because she's like giving me a really hard time. Right. But I think that relationship to anger actually was something that I burned through, like through the last 4 or 5 years. And I think in a way now I kind of see it as a beneficial development, because I feel a little less like conflict avoidant, and I feel a little more sure of like what my perspective is on things, and a little more willing to take some ownership for that. So it was sort of an interesting psychological journey of like starting and then going through that process and kind of coming out to this side. I mean, I'm not through yet, but there are some benefits, I think,
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. How old are you?
I'm 52, almost 53.
Yeah, I'm 51.
Okay, I'm coming up right behind you guys.
Defined as menopausal now. When I went to my OB appointment in April, that number was like way over. He's like, you're well in now. And I had just started my hot flashes and not sleeping well. And he's like, try hormone treatment if you want. And I'm like, give it to me. And just got on it right away. And it was game changer, miracle drug. I love it. I didn't take my estrogen one day, and oh my God, I couldn't stand anything that came out of my husband's mouth. I mean, he would say something and I would turn around and roll my eyes and just be like a 14-year-old, just like, oh my God, I hate him so much. And then I realized around 5 o'clock, I was like, oh, I forgot to wipe that shit on my arm this morning.
And we're all coming at it from a really privileged place, right?
Yes.
And so, I mean, when I think about that, that makes me even more furious. But but the information,
right. And the money that if your insurance doesn't cover it, I was like, that's okay. Let me. I've heard you're good. I want you. And that's not. I think about that all the time. That's not something that everyone can do. And then, so if you can't do that, what do you do?
Suffer.
When you're talking about hormone replacement therapy, also, I mean, there's just so much misinformation and conflicting information. The thing about the internet too is there's old information and you don't always even know if it's the most recent studies, or are there even any reliable studies happening. So, there's a huge concern. Even what my understanding is that bioidentical hormones were a lesser risk for having a cancer risk. And that's not true. And from what I've read, you know, and from what I've talked to with other women. And so, you know, that's also terrifying. It's like, well, there's this really wonderful stuff that can make you feel amazing and more yourself again, but there's also this big risk with it.
Well, I'm on the fence about hormones, actually. I was just talking to a friend about this the other day, because I think research kind of supports both sides. There is a protective effect for some cancers and bone health, and then there's also some risks that go along with it. And particularly, I think the latest stuff that I was reading is that there's sort of a window of opportunity right before you hit actual menopause, where if you start taking hormones then for a number of years, like 5 to 7 years, that it's more protective than risk. And then that diminishes, that ratio diminishes, over time. So
I think I read that as well.
Yeah.
My doctor encouraged that because of that.
yes. I think that's the latest that's out there right now and what
The
people are
latest.
working off of,
Right.
you know, but that could change. I mean,
Right.
we're kind of all guinea pigs in a way, I think, for that. But
We are.
I've just been really uncomfortable with hot flashes, and my mind, I feel like my thinking is really not clear, and I can't depend on myself in that way, and that's really unsettling to me. So for that reason, I've been thinking about venturing into that. So
Well, I jumped over the edge into it because I had thought about it for a long time beforehand, and it has been pretty amazing for me. I'm feeling really good right now. But I went from being somebody who doesn't take anything ever to having this like
my
giant shelf.
Handfuls.
Handfuls of supplements.
Handfuls of pills.
And on top of it, the CBD and the collagen. And my doctor was even saying that some women stay on it even in their 60s because they like, you know, for your face and
Right.
and your skin and things like that. And they're like, no, I'm not ever getting off of it. And I'm feeling like I look in the mirror and I see myself, which I didn't see for a long time. There was, you know, about 4 or 5 years there that I didn't recognize that person.
Right.
And I feel like I do now. So it's kind of reclaiming myself.